You're on.
Okay. I think the first thing that you realise as a poet is the extent to which the process is sort of out of your control. You can sit down with the idea of writing a particular poem about a particular subject, perhaps, if you're lucky, with some particular profound message coming through. That's your first mistake, I think. At the end, when the poem is written, it's often quite different to how you imagined it would be when you began the process. There's a quote from the poet and critic Denise Riley, who says, "Writing, you can feel like a blindfolded sculptor, slapped around the head by damp lumps of clay, which you must try to seize and throw back at the haphazardly forming art object, before it stiffens itself into some shape you never quite intended." So I'll start with a poem that I think is a case in point for myself. Began as one idea, ended up something entirely different. The Astronaut's Wife. When he goes on a trip, I lock the doors, slip into my leisure suit, and somersault across the sitting room. I eat takeaways, let silvery dust settle on the surfaces. I imagine him up there, tied by an umbilical cord to his landing craft. He is pawing rocks with sausage fingers, leaving his mark in ton-weight boots. When he first showed me the night sky, I wanted to pluck the aloof moon and warm it in my hands. Later, he filled my ear with names of the seas: cleverness, fecundity, serenity. I mouthed the Latin mare cognitum, the sea that has become known. He took me round the world, explained the enigma of ancient craters. Now I climb jagged mountains alone. The air is thin when I reach the summit. If I leap off the top into nothingness, will my body become weightless? I want to find out. I suppose it sounds obvious to say, but I'm absolutely fascinated by words. Individual words, their strength as independent entities, and how they somehow change in the space of a poem, the way that they interact with other words. Their potential, I suppose, to create an experience for the reader that is somehow set apart from the experience that originally brought them to the page. This poem is my tribute to sheep. What you have heard is true. We just stare and chew, regurgitate a little bit and purge. All that passes between our ears is the odd woolly thought about tussocks and the sensation of rain. The highlight of our day is a head scratch over by the long fence, or a skittering lollop to the trough. We announce ourselves to the world in a guttural way. Nightingales, we are not. A trip to the seaside is beyond us. Instead, rubber-clad men visit despicable things on us in dark fields. Dogs, too, are not our best friends. Even stitched into thick jumpers, winter makes our knees knock. Summers we sweat. We are lumped together, deprived of an extra S to dignify our existence. And death, when it comes, is unrepeatable. Our legacy to you amounts to little. We are an insult to older ladies. Errant individuals acquire our name. We are a simple wisp on the barb. Aside from a poetic interest in livestock, I like to think that my poetry has a sort of a strong human presence. I think the way it's helped me in the past is to try and come to an understanding of relationships, events, thought processes that I couldn't quite work out in the flesh, so to speak. This poem is called The Gathering. Yes, it is dead, heavy as a man's heart, but it is loved. Pinned by 6 prongs to a stainless platter, It reflects the sheen of our admiration, carried like a baby down carpeted aisle to the altar. A communal ooh exudes, and somebody yelps. It quivers. There is a great uprush of steam, the last of its breath disappearing into artex. Breast, leg, rump, all denuded. We fear the moment when it is gone, and we must regard each other, rather than this dismantled cathedral, the high dome of the bones. We pick what remains from walls and ceiling, and see inside its ruined home. This poem sprang out of a trapped nerve, resitting biology. Peas, she says, pressed into the small of the back. Also, a pelvic exercise suitable for a public place. Another requires the spine to be unrolled and laid out flat on the floor. The nerves emerge from vertebrae like a shock of comic hair, each strand alive with static. She scribbles a sketch, as for a child, that depicts the swollen disc in blue ballpoint pen and the sciatic nerve in red, snaking down a simulacrum of a leg. 30 years earlier, arse planted in a chair, I knew little about human anatomy. A clutch of ill-digested facts about intestines, heart and brain, and somehow even less about it now. What goes where, how and why. My surprise at everything that transpires under the skin, surpassed only by a jolt in the gut, when I suddenly see the way connections are made, the miracle of pain. I suppose in essence I like to tell a story. I'm very keen on narrative. And I like to use the surreal as well. I think the surreal is very useful as a way of liberating moments in time, particularly in difficult material, moments in time and particular experiences. This one's called The Return. A month ago, you carried me on your shoulders across these stones and into the lap of salt water. You said not to worry about clouds because you had the sun in your pocket. Now I have the pock-faced moon for company. It looks down on me and frowns at my blistered feet. Wind rushes from behind a bluff and lifts me clean into the air. There's the spot where you brushed sand from your trousers, picked up your briefcase, and told me you had to go. You pressed the sun into my palm and said it would guard me in the dark. I waved as you slowly disappeared under the surface and wondered if you would make it back in time. The last thing I saw was your bald head like an island. If you were here for my birthday, you could watch me flying all on my own, clear of the stones, into the all-embracing night, a copper coin clenched in my hand. And finally, I think poetry is all about mess. There's this easy bit that's the bit right at the beginning where you get this germ of an idea, it starts to develop inside you. And then there's the bit at the end where you're doing the fine-tuning, the tinkering. I like those bits, they're good. Then there's this bit in the middle that's just chaos, and it's quite alarming, but it's also very exciting because I think that's where the real work of poetry and any creative process is done in mess. So to finish, this is a poem that's had to fight its way through quite a lot of mess. Phobia. Fresh out of bed in a dread sweat, this fitful pre-dawn morning, I see it immediately, stretched out on its side as if in earthbound flight or mock death. It could even be dreaming if it weren't for the inert body, and I creep really close to check for breathing. An insistent nudge in, out of the brown, almost black flank. Standing over my foe, I am drawn by the fine lines of the claws, steel needles that have had me stark staring into shadows, ratching underneath the kitchen sink, round the backs of crummy cupboards. A compulsive craving is deep in the night swig of anything, ancient sherry, turpentine, desperate to find something, praying to come up with nothing. And now I do see the perfectly engineered ears pressed back behind each black bead eye inlaid in its socket. The tail, a section of electric flex. I swear blind I've seen flashing behind sofas, vanishing under bedroom doors, scooting along the lengths of skirtings, but never seen so close. A hair's breadth from my quivering fingertips. In a blood surge rush, I pick it up and deliberately feel the weight, the small and still warm bullet body against my skin, and picture the heart and lungs and brain all packed in their miraculous places and ebbing like an engine after a furious run. And I imagine what epic journey has brought it here, from the hot jostle of birth, through a maze of fear and freeze, to the final shelter of this shaking palm. Thank you.